Good evening and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from the Cape. I'm Will Robinson Smith and I'll be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We're now under T minus 58 minutes, 48 seconds and counting as we prepare for the latest SpaceX mission. We're broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Tonight I'm joined by Stephen Young, who is running our social media and graphics for this broadcast, and Adam Bernstein, who is operating the cameras for us tonight. Right now, you're taking a live look at Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise referred to as Slick 40. In the center of your screen, you see SpaceX's Falcon 9 rocket standing at the ready. And in less than an hour, SpaceX will attempt, once again, to launch the Starlink Group 66 mission. I say we'll try again, of course, because if you were with us yesterday, you know that SpaceX did try multiple times for the launch, but unfortunately, weather proved to be a stubborn thing. Tonight, SpaceX is targeting a T0 liftoff time of 8:50. Originally, that was 7:09 p.m. Eastern, which was 23:09 UTC, but that had to slide back again because of some weather interference. So tonight they're looking at 8:50 p.m. Eastern, which is 0050 UTC on July 24th for our viewers around the world. If you'd like to support our coverage of the space program, please hit the like button and click subscribe so you'll get notifications of when new videos are posted and you don't miss any of our live streams. Also, if you would and you enjoy this coverage, please share the stream. It helps us reach more people and help folks to find our live coverage and everything else going on with the channel. And naturally, we can't do these broadcasts without the support of our members and viewers, so heartfelt thank you to everyone who made a contribution to help fund our coverage. And if you'd like to help improve and expand our coverage of the space program, we would love it if you would consider making a donation through YouTube's Super Chat feature or become a member of our YouTube channel. Membership grants you access to our special members-only videos, as well as discounts for our online shop. As we get things rocking and rolling here this evening, want to give a thank you to Mark Otto, who gifted 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. So thank you, Mark, for that. Also, SG for gifting $3 and a big thumbs up from a cute-looking little animated character there. Thank you again to them and for everyone who helps donate to our channel and helps keeps this coverage going. Now at T-minus 55 minutes and counting, less than 20 minutes away from the point at which the launch director will give their go for the start of propellant load for tonight's launch. SpaceX is running their countdown from its Launch and Landing Control Center just outside of the south gate of Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And if you've had the chance to visit us here on the Space Coast and get out near the Port Canaveral area, the Launch and Landing Control Center just north of the cruise terminals there. SpaceX's launch team also has support from their control rooms at their headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Their go, no go poll will be done electronically. And by this point in time, the chief engineer should have already conducted a technical poll. Well, if you've been busy during your Sunday and haven't been avidly checking on our social media or the weather here on Florida's Space Coast or on our Launchpad live stream, we've had another day of storms rolling through Central Florida and out here at the Cape. Not very atypical for summertime in Florida. Things here, just looking out the window, looking at the radar, have been improving, which is good. Most of the weather seems to be well offshore right now. We haven't had any lightning strikes in the last several minutes, which is certainly encouraging. And so hopefully SpaceX can find a window to punch through for a launch tonight. We still have some clouds lingering around the area, and all lightning advisories have been lifted. Steven just informed me of, so that is good. If you recall, yesterday during our launch coverage, there was quite a bit of Phase 2 lightning warning activity happening, and that, of course, is not something that SpaceX can launch through, especially if the Phase 2 warning is out at the pad itself. Again, tonight's launch is targeting a T0 of 8:50 p.m. Eastern, 0050 UTC. However, if they do need to push back, again, they have more time later in the window, 2 more launch opportunities tonight. The next up would be 9:40 p.m. Eastern or 0140 UTC. And then the last one is 10:31 p.m. Eastern, 0231 UTC on July 24th. And if all that doesn't give them enough opportunities, they do have 4 backup windows or opportunities to launch during their window on Monday the 24th. That begins at 6:44 p.m. Eastern, 2244 UTC, and lasts until 10:06 p.m. Eastern or 0206 UTC on July 25th. Coming up at the top of the hour here, 8 o'clock now on a Sunday evening here at the Cape, T-minus 50 minutes and counting. If SpaceX is able to launch tonight or whenever the Starlink 6.6 mission goes off, it will be the 36th launch from Florida Space Coast this year. SpaceX is responsible for launching 34 of those missions. 32 were with what you see tonight, hopefully, with the Falcon 9 rocket. SpaceX also launched 2 Falcon Heavy missions. The other one was United Launch Alliance's, or ULA's, Delta IV Heavy rocket. That was a mission for the National Reconnaissance Office last month. Let's go ahead and talk about tonight's mission. It is the Starlink 6.6 mission. It's the 94th SpaceX launch dedicated primarily to the deployment of its satellites for SpaceX's Starlink internet constellation. On board this particular Falcon 9 are 22 Starlink satellites. These are the newer version called Starlink V2 Mini. It's an intermediate design that SpaceX developed for its Starlink network. Think about it as like a bridge between the older generation, which were the version 1.5s, and the next generation, which will be the full-size version 2 satellites. And those version 2 satellites will be launched on SpaceX's fully reusable Starship vehicle. Speaking of which, here's a live view of SpaceX operations at Starbase near Boca Chica Beach in Texas. The shot on the left-hand side of your screen is courtesy of our partners at Lab Padre. In the center of your screen, you can see Booster 9 right now on the orbital launch mount. A little bit of venting coming from that booster. It's not quite as frosty as it was about an hour or so ago, as they've been doing some testing out there throughout the day. This particular booster was rolled over on Friday to begin some of the testing that we've been seeing throughout the day today. SpaceX prepares for the next flight of the fully integrated Starship vehicle. No word just yet on exactly when that will happen. We're keeping an eye on all those operations, both at Starbase as well as in the court system, since the FAA and SpaceX are in a legal disagreement with a few different groups after the Starship launch earlier this year. Saw quite a bit of debris that went flying from the launch site after that mission took off. At the end of last month, the FAA and SpaceX filed a mission to dismiss the case. Of course, we'll continue to keep track of the legal proceedings, things that happen at Starbase as we get closer to the next launch of this very important rocket, not only for SpaceX and its ambitions with Starlink and some of the other flights that it has on its roster, but also for NASA's Artemis program, since Starship will be used as the human landing system on the Artemis 3 mission. So NASA has been closely tracking the progress of Starship, working with SpaceX on the human landing system version of Starship that will be used on Artemis 3 to dock with the Orion spacecraft. Astronauts will cross from Orion into Starship and land on the moon. Their plan is for about a week before departing the lunar surface, going back to Orion, and then making the trip home. Starting with Artemis 4, Starship will dock to the Gateway. Think of it as a smaller version of the International Space Station. As it has been described by some NASA folks, it is a good bit smaller, though, than the space station, currently thought of less for super long-term habitation and more for some quick stopovers. But, of course, Gateway will continue to evolve and expand as the Artemis program continues on. As the launch countdown continues, T-minus 43 minutes and counting. I want to thank about the 2,500 of you we have watching live right now. A shout out to Josh King, who made a $4.99 super chat donation, and to Demolish Donuts, love the name, for $2. Really appreciate the support of this channel, and for all those who have hit the like button. That also helps others find this live stream on YouTube, and sharing the stream is also very big help. So for those of you that can hit the like button for us, that would be fabulous. And as we continue on, let's talk a little bit about where this rocket is going. Let's talk trajectory, shall we? So the Falcon 9 will lift off from the pad at Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It will fly in a southeast trajectory toward the Caribbean. Following stage separation, first stage will land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. Tonight, the one on deck happens to be Just Read the Instructions. The upper stage will then continue on with the Starlink satellites in tow. The fairing halves will jettison a bit downrange of this map, and SpaceX will use the recovery vessel Bob to retrieve those. That ship, as well as the other recovery vessel Doug, those were named after former NASA astronauts Bob Behnken and Doug Hurley. Of course, they were the duo that flew aboard the Demo 2 mission in May 2020, returning human spaceflight to launching from American soil for the first time since the end of the space shuttle era. Now you may be thinking to yourself, well, if Bob is supporting this mission, what is Doug up to? Well, I'm so glad you asked. Earlier today, Doug left Port Canaveral in anticipation of staging ahead of the planned Falcon Heavy launch, which is currently targeting liftoff from Launch Complex 39A on a Wednesday. We anticipate hearing the launch director's decision on the poll shortly. So we'll keep an ear open for that and bring that update as it happens. For now, let's talk about some of the facts about the payload on board this particular mission. On your screen, you see a file photo of what the Starlink V2 mini satellites look like when they're stacked in the launch configuration. This particular photo is taken before another Starlink launch. Tonight will be the 7th launch of these V2 minis, each of them weighing about 1,760 pounds. It's about 800 kilograms. Now, after the solar panels unfurl, they'll have a wingspan of 100 feet. It's about 30 meters. They use argon hull thrusters for in-orbit maneuvers and were built near Seattle in Redmond, Washington.
All teams have pulled go for propellant and launch.
And there we heard from the launch director.
For no-go conditions, brief the C or LD, and they'll approve aboarding the countdown. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into the launch abort sequence. At T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off, relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count.
And some good updates there from the launch director that they have pulled go for propellant load beginning. That should start in about 3 or so minutes at T-minus 35 minutes.
Tanks venting for propellant load.
There we have the call for tanks fitting for propellant load. In about a minute and a half, SpaceX will start to load the RP-1, which is the rocket-grade kerosene, into the rocket, both in the first and second stages. And the first stage LOX loading will begin, that being the liquid oxygen on the first stage. Second stage LOX loading will begin at T-minus 16 minutes.
Launch auto sequence has started.
And we heard the call off for the propellant loading sequence to begin. Things are moving in a good direction for tonight as SpaceX continues the countdown toward a T0 liftoff at 8:50 p.m. Eastern, 0050 UTC. As the countdown proceeds, want to give a thank you to Alan Gable for his $20 super chat. Very appreciative of that. All your support and sharing of the stream and liking our content helps us reach more people and helps us to expand our coverage of the space program and do more fun and innovative and interesting things here at Spaceflight Now. So really appreciate all of the support, and for the 3,900 of you watching live, thank you so much for joining us. Let's talk a little bit about where the payloads will be going after liftoff in just a little over half an hour from now. The target orbit apogee is 188 miles or 303 kilometers. And it will be going to an inclination of about 43 degrees above the equator. Starlink satellites will use their ion thrusters over the following weeks and months to raise to their operational orbit. As of today, SpaceX has more than 4,400 Starlink satellites currently working on orbit. We've been talking a little bit about the Starlink version 1.5 satellites versus the V2 Mini, so let's give you a little visual aid to get that in your mind before liftoff. On the left-hand side of your screen, you see the version 1.5 satellites in front of one half of the payload fairings that sit atop the Falcon 9 rocket. The V2 Minis are there on the left-hand side of your screen. Now, the last launch that we had from the Cape earlier this week, or I should say actually last week now, that this launch was delayed from yesterday to today, that was the final batch of the version 1.5 satellites. That was the Starlink 5-15 mission. If you're keeping track on your calendar or Excel spreadsheet at home, watching all the SpaceX missions here. You see a little bit of venting there from the Falcon 9 rocket in use tonight as the propellant, the liquid oxygen, gets loaded onto the rocket's first stage. More or less than 10 minutes from what's called the big vent, when we see quite a lot of vapors coming from the strongback there. That'll happen at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds, give or take. Looking at some of the differences between the version 1.5 and the V2 minis here, they have 4 times the capacity. They introduce E-band for backhaul, and they feature upgraded phased array antennas. They're about 2.6 times heavier than the version 1.5 satellites, which is partly why you only see 22 of these satellites on board SpaceX's Falcon 9, whereas for previous launches you had sometimes 52, 54, 56 of the version 1.5s. And the V2 minis also use argon Hall thrusters, which replace the Krypton thrusters. If you want an idea of what those look like, that is an argon Hall thruster for you. SpaceX currently has more than 1.5 million Starlink internet customers around the world. This map that you see here on your screen shows what coverage looks like today. The light blue areas are where Starlink coverage is currently available, and the dark blue are a combination of customers that are either on standby or coming soon. So now we've talked a little bit about and shown you what these Starlink satellites look like. You may be wondering, well, if you have Starlink or know someone, what does that receiver look like? Here's a publicity photo of one of those receivers on top of a roof. And Starlink offers a variety of internet packages that can be used in a number of locations, such as on a car, on a plane, trains. Of course, you have ships. Plenty of cruise ships now use Starlink internet on their vessels. Starlink also works in harsh environments, like as seen in this photo from Antarctica near a research facility. Taking a look now at the countdown for tonight's Starlink mission. past a number of these milestones as we get ready. As we mentioned, T-minus 38 was the go-no-go pull, and we've been in the process of propellant load now. That RP-1, the rocket-grade kerosene, is being loaded both on the first and second stage of the rocket as liquid oxygen flows right now just into the first stage. At T-minus 16 minutes, liquid oxygen will start flowing into the second stage. As we mentioned, at about T-minus 20 minutes is when that big vent from the strong back will happen. That's as the feed lines are chilled and the super cold propellant meets the warm Florida atmosphere. At T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines will get underway. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps. It's important because it protects those engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. At about T-minus 6 minutes prior to launch, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract begin to happen as it moves away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It reclines to an angle of about 1.5 degrees, leaning back just a little bit from the Falcon 9, and will stay there until liftoff. At that point, the strong back will pull back much more quickly, clearing the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9 off the pad. At T-minus 2 minutes, liquid oxygen should be completely full on the second stage. The Falcon 9 will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellants. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown will be handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks will be brought up to flight pressure, and the SpaceX launch director will give their go for liftoff. Then the engine ignition command will be issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And of course, the moment we are waiting for, if all those 9 Merlin engines ignite and continue to be healthy, the flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamp to release, and the Falcon 9 will lift off at T0. T-minus 22 minutes and counting. We are just a couple minutes and some change away from the big vent. I want to thank Ian James for his $5 Super Chat donation. Fun little animation there of, it kind of looks like a lemon with sunglasses. That's cute there. Thank you, James. And thank you to all of you for supporting and joining us as we now have about 5,500 of you watching live with us. So thank you all for joining us on what will hopefully be the second time as the charm for SpaceX tonight.
Good pogo bleed. Stage 2 fuel load is complete.
And there we have confirmation from SpaceX that stage 2 of the rocket grade kerosene, the RP1, is complete, as we see the start of the big vent there. Moving fairly horizontally perpendicular to the rocket, as we see a bit of a breeze here at the Cape. American flag near the countdown clock here at the KSC press site, wafting a little bit in the breeze, so bit of wind here tonight, but so far that should not be a restricting element for SpaceX to be able to launch tonight. T-minus 18 minutes and counting. Want to give SG a shout out for his $10 super chat. And again, to all of those who continue to support our coverage of the space program, both during these live streams by hitting the like button and sharing the stream, and for all those who are joining us right now live as we are approaching, and we just crossed a little over 6,800 of you that are joining us now live. So thank you to those watching both near and far from Florida's Space Coast. Hopefully for those that are in the vicinity that are hoping to catch a glimpse of this rocket tonight, if it does lift off on time. I hope the cloud cover is not so thick that you won't be able to see it from wherever you're watching from, but in the case that that does happen to you and you get blocked by some clouds, well, glad you're here watching us on the live stream, because we'll bring you some excellent views of it. Our videographer Adam doing an excellent job with manning the cameras, both the live pictures that you see here right now, as well as taking some excellent still photos. In just about 30 seconds or so, we should hear from the launch director that LOX loading on the second stage of the Falcon 9.
Stage 2 LOX load has begun.
And there you go. Stage 2 LOX loading has begun. As reusability is a hallmark of SpaceX as a launch company, this booster not making its debut flight tonight. This will actually be the 6th flight of this particular booster, tail number 1076. So let's wind the clock back a little bit, take a trip down memory lane, and talk about how we got here, starting with its first debut which is back on November 26, 2022. That was the Commercial Resupply Services, or CRS-26 mission. That's when this booster sent 7,700 pounds of cargo and science experiments to the International Space Station. It included a pair of rollout solar arrays that are augmenting power currently on the ISS. They also launched some seeds for dwarf tomatoes as part of the continued study of growing fresh food in microgravity environment. Extremely important as NASA continues to explore long-duration missions and move in its moon to Mars architecture. We need to know how best to create a fresh diet for all of the astronauts who are going to be exploring the cosmos in the years to come. Next for this booster was January 10th. That was the flight of the OneWeb 16 mission. This would be the second to last dedicated launch of OneWeb satellites aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. UK-based OneWeb was launching its satellites for its internet constellation, previously using rockets from Russia. However, after Russia invaded Ukraine in February 2022, OneWeb turned to other launch providers for its remaining satellites. It assigned 3 of those missions to SpaceX and the other 2 to the Indian Space Research Organization. Fun fact as well, the satellites used for the OneWeb internet constellation were manufactured not too far from the Cape at a facility called Airbus OneWeb Satellites. A little bit of Space Coast synergy for those missions. So, proud day for the folks here on Merritt Island who got to not have to travel to watch their handiwork get launched to orbit. The third flight of this booster was on February 27th. That was the first time it happened to support a Starlink mission, that being Starlink 6-1. This was the first batch of the new Starlink V2 mini satellites that launched. It then took flight again in April, on April 7th to be specific. This was the launch of a combination of things. The principal payload was the Intelsat 40E satellite for the company Intelsat. Hosted on board was NASA's TEMPO mission, standing for Tropospheric Emissions Monitoring of Pollution. This is NASA's first space-based instrument that monitors air pollution all over North America during the daytime. And in fact, just over a month ago, TEMPO was turned on for the first time. NASA said, quote, "TEMPO has to warm up for approximately 1 month to evaporate any water before cooling down to operational temperatures for additional system testing," end quote. NASA says first time it'll be able to open up its instruments, set for the end of this month, and it will begin its routine operations in October. And last but not least for this booster was the May 19th launch of another Starlink mission, that being Starlink 6-3, that launched now 65 days ago. It was the final mission before you get ready to launch it one more time. Hopefully tonight, hopefully in 11 minutes and some change. Now less than 10 minutes till the hopeful liftoff of this Falcon 9, so let's talk a little bit about this particular launch vehicle. It stands at 70 meters or 229 feet tall. It has a diameter of 3.66 meters. It's about 12 feet. Taking a look at the first stage of this rocket, the bottom half that we've seen a lot of activity, a little bit of venting from. Bottom 2/3 is this first stage, and as you mentioned, today's booster has flown 5 times, looking to make its 6th flight today. At the base of the first stage are those 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, and will produce 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are the black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Again, tonight's drone ship will be just to read the instructions, waiting patiently for the first stage to arrive. Just above that first stage is what's called the inner stage. It's a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. In this image, you can also see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. They're titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere like a tail-first dart heading toward that drone ship. At the top of the inner stage, there are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. At first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure it's a clean separation. Second stage engine nozzle is safely housed inside the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, this is the upper stage of the Falcon 9, powered by just a single modified Merlin engine, which you'll hear SpaceX refer to as a Merlin vacuum engine or MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle, which is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space. It produces more than 200,000 pounds of thrust. It'll be fired
And intro. Stage 1 fuel load complete.
Continuing on with the payload fairing here. At the very top of the rocket, housing those 22 Starlink V2 mini satellites. Payload is made of a carbon composite material and is 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. You saw what the inside looks like when we showed you the image of the Starlink
Pressing for struck back retract.
1.5 satellites. And you heard That strong back retract is preparing to begin now. As strong back will lean back a little bit. Should be able to see that on the screen shortly.
Strong back retract has started.
Here you see strong back retract has now begun. So it'll start to move away from the Falcon 9. SpaceX says it's continuing to track weather, of course, as it has been a nuisance last night and a watch item today, but so far things are continuing to proceed, and so hopefully we will have a launch in less than 4 minutes from now.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
And then we have the call out for stage 1 LOX load complete. Under 3 minutes left in the count. One of the last major milestones in the count is about T-minus 1 minute 30 seconds when LOX load will be complete on the second stage as well. And you can see on the screen the strong back just tilting back a little bit. And of course, when we get right down to the point of liftoff, it will speed back much more quickly as it clears the way for the Falcon 9 to leap off the pad.
Stage 2 LOX load complete.
And there we hear the call for stage 2 LOX load complete. Now the Falcon 9 is fully loaded. Coming up on T-minus 1 minute now. At that point, the flight computers will take control. Stages 1 and 2 will pressurize for flight. Should hear a call out in just a moment here.
Ground gas closeout.
Vehicle is in startup.
And the vehicle now in startup. Things are tracking well for liftoff in 45 seconds. We're waiting for the final go for launch from the launch director now. T-minus just about 30 seconds.
LD, go for launch.
Launch director has given the go for launch. We are now and we are seconds away from liftoff. All right, 15 seconds. 10. Engine start. And we have liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket carrying the Starlink 6-6 mission. And the Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. It is pitching downrange as it climbs away from Cape Canaveral, heading in a southeast direction. Pressure is nominal for SpaceX, and boy, you can hear those 9 Merlin engines roaring. Merlin engines will begin throttling down as the vehicle approaches max Q. That is the point of greatest dynamic pressure. As the Falcon 9 is now traveling at supersonic speed, faster than the speed of sound. And we're getting some great views from our tracking camera in southern Brevard County from Pete Karstens. And we're in the start of MVAC chill now. T+151 in the mission. Got less than a minute left of the burn on the first stage.
Miko.
We switched over to
Stage separation confirmed.
SpaceX's onboard view from the Falcon 9 as we see confirmation of stage separation. And Falcon 9's first stage now coming back down toward Earth, looking to land on the drone ship in the Atlantic Ocean. First stage now slowing down to a speed of about 7,600 kilometers per hour and slowing as it heads back down toward the drone ship. Now T+3 minutes.
Bearing separation confirmed.
And the call out for fairing separation, you see that on your screen as the Starlink V2 mini satellites now exposed to space as the second stage continues on its climb up. Those fairing halves will be recovered in the Atlantic Ocean by the recovery vessel Bob. And we see on our tracking camera just a little glimpse of that first stage as seen from Florida's Space Coast as it heads now back down to the drone ship. And we see the altitude starting to decrease on the stage 1 of the Falcon 9. You can see the tracking here as stage 2 continues to climb. We're coming up soon on the entry burn for the first stage. This burn is important as it will
Stage
slow
one,
down the
nominal
descent
trajectory.
and reduce heating. You see a beautiful view of the curvature of the Earth as you see sun setting just over the horizon there from the views from SpaceX's Falcon 9 Stage 2, that Merlin vacuum engine. We're at T plus
Stage 1
615,
FTS as saved.
and we hear the call out
Stage
for
1
the
entry burn startup.
flight termination system has been saved, and we see the Stage 1 entry burn has begun at T plus 6 minutes 30 seconds, now underway. You see that speed gauge really start to plummet as this first stage is hitting the brakes on
Stage
its
1
way
entry
back
burn
down
shut down.
to the Atlantic Ocean. Entry
Stage
burn is
2
now
FTS
completed.
as saved.
Stage 2 is continuing to climb into orbit.
Both stages are on nominal trajectories.
Hear the call from SpaceX that things are continuing to move nominally in this mission as the first stage continues its descent back down toward the drone ship. Just read the instructions.
Stage 1 transonic.
Stage 1 now transonic at T plus 7 minutes 43 seconds. You may notice a discrepancy between our countdown clock and what you see there on the SpaceX feed, and that's because there's a bit of lag in the broadcast from SpaceX.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 1 landing burn has now begun as it approaches the drone
Terminal
ship in the
guidance.
Atlantic Ocean. See a great steady shot of the drone ship.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
Those landing legs are out and stretched. And touchdown for
Stage
SpaceX.
1 landing confirmed.
As this booster has now launched, landed, made its 6th flight, and will be refurbished for its next mission coming up.
Seco.
And you heard the call out there for SECO. It's second stage engine cutoff.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And the second engine has gone into a nominal orbit insertion.
Expected loss of signal, Bermuda.
We're now at T plus 9 minutes, 23 seconds and counting. At this point, the second stage will continue to coast until about T plus 54 minutes and 1 second, when we'll hear SES 2. That's the second engine start. And that will be a burn lasting just a couple seconds. And we'll hear another call out for second engine cutoff 2, SECO 2. Starlink satellites will be ready to deploy at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, 19 seconds. So seeing as we are in the long coast phase now before SES-2, we're going to wind down our live coverage here on this particular live stream, but you can hop over to Launchpad Live, and we'll continue to update you on this mission as it continues on through satellite deployment. Want to once again thank all of you who've joined us in the live stream here, and for all those who have liked the stream, who have shared the stream, to those who made super chat donations. Greatly appreciate the contributions to our coverage of the space program. Certainly could not do without you, and want to give a special thanks to Pete Karstens and Ed Geiger for helping to support the tracking shots you saw following launch, as well as to the full Spaceflight Now team helping to support us out here, Stephen Young and Adam Bernstein. We're going to go ahead and wrap this up tonight, as turns out second time was the charm. Did not need to go for a third go on the backup on Monday. I think we're all appreciative of that. So again, please join us over if you'd like to continue tracking the coverage of this particular mission, Starlink 6-6, on the Launchpad Live stream. We'll hop over there. For now, though, I'm Will Robinson-Smith. For the Spaceflight Now team, thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you on the next mission. Good night.